It started with a sound, a crunch that didn't belong on a quiet Sunday morning. When I stepped outside, my car looked like it had been chewed up and spat out by rage itself. And there he was, the neighbor's golden boy, the kid everyone called perfect, standing there with wide eyes and privilege written all over his face. I thought the truth would protect me. I thought doing the right thing would matter. But where I saw justice, they saw trouble, and somehow I became the villain. My mornings used to be predictable. Coffee before sunrise, a jog through the quiet streets of our suburban block, and a quick wave to neighbors who smiled but never really saw me. I'd lived there for 5 years, long enough to know who watered their lawns twice a day and who peeked through the blinds when I parked my car. I worked hard, kept to myself, paid my bills on time. Just another face in a neighborhood that prided itself on being safe. But being safe doesn't always mean being welcome. There was always a layer, unseen but felt, in every polite nod, every curious glance that lingered a little too long. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe. Yet that uneasy hum beneath the calm, that whisper that said you're tolerated, not accepted, had been there all along. Then one weekend, that quiet normalcy cracked. It started with a sound, metal on metal, and by the time I ran outside, my peace, my routine, my place in this neighborhood would all be up for debate. The boy's panicked apology barely formed before his father's voice cut through the air. Sharp, authoritative, and protective in that way people reserve for someone they already believe is innocent. I stood there staring at what used to be my car, hood dented, glass like shattered ice across the pavement, and tried to keep my voice steady. I said I was going to call the police, mostly for the insurance report. That's when the air changed. The father's face hardened, and the other neighbors began stepping out from behind their screens and fences. In seconds, I wasn't the victim of an accident. I was the problem. Their looks said it before their words did. How dare I call the cops on their good kid? How dare I bring trouble to their peaceful street? When the sirens finally came, I thought logic would calm everything down. But logic doesn't work the same for everyone. The officer barely looked at my car before turning to me with that slight squint, the kind that already holds judgment. He asked me what I might have done to provoke the situation. I could feel the heat rise under my skin, the same heat that comes every time someone decides you must have done something to deserve this. The neighbors started chiming in, building their story in real time, how I was overreacting, how I'd always been standoffish. Each word chipped away at my credibility like invisible hands erasing the truth. The father stood tall, voice calm, shaking his head in controlled disappointment, while I stumbled to explain what had actually happened. I tried to stay composed, because anger would only confirm what they were waiting to believe. As the officer took notes, he spent more time nodding toward their version than listening to mine. I could see the shift, the quiet comfort people feel when they band together against someone who doesn't quite fit. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't about the car anymore. It was about everything else I represented to them. The boy's mother clutched her son like he was a victim of me. I looked around at faces that had once smiled at me over mailboxes, and saw something I'd noticed before but never truly named, a polite kind of hostility that hides behind words like neighborly and community. Their eyes said I didn't belong. By the time the officer left, my broken car was still sitting there and my name felt smaller somehow. And as the crowd drifted back into their houses, whispering behind closed doors, I stood in the middle of the street, heart pounding, wondering how quickly truth can become irrelevant once skin color enters the story. I told myself it would blow over, that maybe an apology would come once tempers cooled. But the next morning I saw the gossip posts online, the glances that avoided mine, and a knock on my door that promised this was only the beginning. The knock came just after dawn, 3 heavy thuds that rattled through the quiet. I opened the door expecting the officer to return with some update about the report. Instead, 2 more stood behind him, hands resting near their belts, faces already set with suspicion. Someone, they said, had filed a complaint, claimed I'd been threatening the neighbor's family after the incident. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen or spoken to them since that day. They asked to come in. I stepped aside, too stunned to argue. One of them glanced around my living room as though hunting for proof of guilt. The other asked questions that sounded less like curiosity and more like an accusation rehearsed in advance. Had I yelled? Made threats? Left any notes? Each denial seemed to dig me deeper. The neighbors must have been watching through their curtains, waiting for the scene to unfold exactly this way. When I tried to explain, I could see the disbelief sit heavy in their eyes. Logic, again, bent under the weight of assumption. The report wasn't about truth. It was about reclaiming their comfort by writing me as the aggressor. And as the officers exchanged silent glances, a sick realization hit. I was moments away from being handcuffed in the very street where I used to wave hello. I caught my reflection in the window, tense shoulders, tired eyes, someone they'd already decided to fear. My pulse thundered. Every story I'd ever heard about being misread, about moments like this going wrong, flooded in at once. The officer finally spoke. "We're just here to keep the peace," he said. But the way he watched me, you'd think it was my peace he needed protecting from. Then came the sound again, the same crunch that started it all. This time, a car door slamming outside. More neighbors gathering, phones already raised, and right there, I understood that the truth wasn't the question anymore. The question was how far they'd let the lie go, and whether I'd survive the version of me they'd created. When the officers finally left, the quiet felt heavier than before, thick with the kind of silence that says you've been marked. I stood at my window, watching them wave reassuringly at the same neighbors who had called them on me. Not one glance in my direction, not one acknowledgement of the truth they'd twisted. Just smiles exchanged between the good people, keeping their street safe from the man who no longer belonged. Over the next few days, the gossip hardened into reputation. Conversation stopped when I walked by. Notes appeared on my windshield telling me to keep the peace. I thought about selling the house, leaving everything behind. But leaving would have felt like agreement, like admitting I was what they saw. So I stayed. Quietly, stubbornly, I fixed the dents on my car myself, left the police report open for whoever might care to read it. And each morning after, when I jogged past those same houses, I felt their eyes again. But this time, I met them. That's the thing about injustice. It doesn't always explode. Sometimes it seeps slow and invisible through the cracks of nice neighborhoods. It disguises itself as concern. It hides behind phrases like misunderstanding and overreaction. But its impact cuts just as deep. What happened on that street wasn't an isolated moment. It was a reflection of something larger. How quickly perception becomes punishment when color enters the equation, how swiftly truth gets buried under comfort. My car can be repaired. My reputation will take longer. But what I refuse to let them destroy is my peace of mind, or the belief that awareness can still change something. So when people say, "It's not that bad anymore," I think of that morning. And I ask, if this isn't bad, then what do we call it?